All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first Notre Dame AmeriCorps alumni webinar. We're really excited to have you all here. And we really created this webinar with the purpose to hear from alumni on their paths after Notre Dame AmeriCorps, the decisions they made, the challenges they faced, and also sort of how they translated their service. We have a panel of alumni here. We're actually still waiting on one who's joining us from Madagascar. So without further ado, I'm actually going to pass it over to Robert Gormley to get things started. Robert, why don't you start by introducing yourself?
Hey, my name is Robert Gormley. I'm currently a principal IT consultant in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm also a co-founder of Corner Office Careers. I served in 1998-99, which seems like a really, really long time ago, in Baltimore, Maryland, at a Jesuit mission school called St. Ignatius Loyola Academy. The mission of the school was to take 25 of the brightest public school students in Baltimore and put them into a middle school, sort of a sponsored private middle school, get them both academically and behaviorally ready for private high schools, and hopefully get them into high school. After serving, I didn't really give myself much thought into the next step in terms of service, but that really all changed on July 31st of 2013, around 6:52 p.m. That's when I spent about 23 minutes under a car after getting hit by a car while I was on a trading ride on my bicycle. Kind of funny how life sort of changes when you're sitting underneath a car and you realize that you've broken your neck. So, you know, it helps you reevaluate a lot of things. And I was super fortunate to have Natalie reach out to me and you know, let me know about this great resource that is available for the alumni. And so I'm just super excited to be here and talking to people.
Thank you, Robert. Wonderful. Jerry, why don't you go next and introduce yourself?
So I'm Jerry Truskin, and I served from 2002 to 2004 in Boulder, Colorado with the I Have a Dream Foundation, and I ran an after-school program for low-income, at-risk kids, and it was one of the biggest experiences of my life and changed the course of my career. I had an engineering degree, and then from there I went and got my master's in social work. And after finishing social work school, I ran a program out of the Free Library of Philadelphia, offering a citywide literacy engagement program for 4 years, and then from there I moved over to the Franklin Institute, which is our large science center, and I started the Philadelphia Science Festival, and it is since we started it become one of the largest and most established festivals in the country, and we grow year over year, and I've been there since 2010. So 2002 also seems like a long time ago, but the kids that I worked with in Colorado had, you know, I've maintained a lot of those relationships, and they recently, I guess about a year and a half ago, or 2 years ago now, graduated from high school, and I went back to see them graduate. So pretty powerful.
That's wonderful. Awesome. Well, thank you for that. John, I'm so glad you're able to join us. We were just saying that we were still waiting on you, so thank you so much for joining. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell us where you are?
Okay, well, my name is John Knauer, and I'm an NDMBA alumni from 2010 to 2013. And I'm currently talking to all of you from the island country of Madagascar, the Indian Ocean. Manakuri from Madagascar. So a little bit about my experience before I came here and did Peace Corps was in 2010 through 2011. I did Notre Dame Mission Volunteers with an organization in Cincinnati, Ohio called Starfire Council, and they were a community development organization that focused specifically on integration for adults with disabilities. And then after I did did AmeriCorps there. I did a second year with Notre Dame Mission Volunteers in New Orleans, Louisiana, working as a volunteer coordinator for an organization called United Saints Recovery Project. And then from there, I started my application process for the Peace Corps, and then in March of 2013, March of last year, I arrived in Madagascar, and I've been here ever since. So I'm happy to talk to all of you today. Happy to speak English. So
that's great. Well, thanks for joining us from so far away. Maria, last but not least, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Maria de Sangles, and I was an NDMVA member from 2009 through 2011. And I served in Apopka, Florida with the Hope Community Center. Then I went on to work for Hope HCC for 2 years, and then just last year I moved up to Baltimore, and I'm now working for Loyola University of Maryland. Serving as a member in Florida was fantastic. It was a chance for me to connect with my immigrant roots, and I became very involved in the immigration movement, and I'm still very tied and connected to it. So it completely influenced and changed the way, changed the direction and course of my life and my path and what I decided to do.
Great. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us today and for sharing a bit about yourself. So what I'd like to do is start actually with you, Maria, leading off from that sort of introduction. You know, what you took away from your service experience. If you could maybe talk a little bit about what did you learn during your time with Notre Dame AmeriCorps, which has really stayed with you even after completing your service.
Sure. Gosh, what didn't I learn during my time through Notre Dame AmeriCorps? I really found myself through NDMVA, especially being in Apopka. I can't really speak for another site because I was there throughout my 2 years, but it was an experience where I got to dig deep and figure out who I am. I was fresh out of college. I wasn't sure what I was doing next. I knew what I was interested in, social justice, but I didn't know what that meant or what that looked like in practice, at least in the real world. I had all these values, but I didn't know what it meant to like work in the community. And so I got to discover that while at the same time developing and discovering myself. Like I said, my first year, I just remember just kind of throwing myself into service and just being open to all the possibilities and all the opportunities that were just given to me. I remember I had such a steep learning curve for professional development where I would just bug my site director day in and day out to just like coach me through writing a professional email or how to answer the phone and all of that, you know, and it just, it totally changed me. I think before NDMVA, I was really sort of afraid to be myself and to be open to the world, you know, and the experience made me open, and it led me down different paths. And that was sort of the other thing I learned was it's okay if your life isn't totally defined right away, because you really, just by being open, you have no idea what the possibilities are and what's next, you know. And the values of being with the community and learning from the community and listening to the community is something that I will carry through the rest of my career. And I've certainly carried into this new transition, into this new position. So
that's great. Yeah, I think that's something that I have found in talking with, you know, alums across the board, that by our model of having volunteers placed at different partnering sites, they really do build this sort of larger network that allows them to sort of be part of multiple communities and also sort of interact with, you know, sort of a locality that sort of helps shape who they are. So I'm really glad that you also felt that. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jerry, I'm actually going to turn to you. Given sort of the different steps that you took, how did your service shape your next step?
So, you know, I had come out of engineering school, and much like Maria, my experience with I Have a Dream and with Notre Dame Mission Volunteers really changed a lot of what I thought a career could be. I didn't realize that that work could be as fun. I mean, I didn't realize that there was this ability to work with people who were like-minded and to feel like you were so connected to what you were doing. So I knew that from that experience that I needed to be doing mission-driven work and to be able to connect to what I was doing in a really meaningful way. I didn't know exactly what that meant. I mean, I had, in fact, very little idea of what one would do with an engineering degree, and I'd come from an environment where everyone was like, "Oh, okay, so why don't you could go and work for a big bank, or go and work for build planes or bombs or light bulbs?" And I was like, this doesn't connect for me. Like, I don't know what this is about. So in finding, I found myself through my AmeriCorps experience, and I became a lot more confident. Just in just echoing a lot of what Maria just covered, that ability to be okay with being yourself and finding energy from that. And I'm extremely hardworking, and I knew that in order to sustain that energy, I needed to continue to focus on things that made me really happy and things that I had fun doing. So that shift led me to apply to graduate school in social work. And I actually was enrolled in a dual program between social work and law. And I realized pretty quickly in graduate school that law wasn't for me. It was not even a little bit fun. Not at all, for me at least. And I knew that connection with people was more important to me. So that's when I shifted sort of into this program administration role and have stuck with it since.
That's great. Thank you for that. That's definitely insightful. John, you also actually had something, some insight into this when we were talking about the core degree. Do you want to maybe expand on that a little bit? How that your service sort of shaped your next step, especially going on to the Peace Corps?
Yeah, after I graduated from college, I graduated with an anthropology degree. It's not a huge job market when it comes to finding jobs in the anthropology field. And so I was led into AmeriCorps. My brother served in AmeriCorps, and I had a good friend who was working at Starfire, the organization I work with, who kind of told me about the AmeriCorps position. So I fell into that. And then I've always been one of those people who, similar to what Jerry was saying, where you should have fun doing what you have to get up for every day. And so I wanted to be one of those people that when I would go to bed at night to get up for work, I wanted to make sure that I was going to bed happy with what I had done that day. And so after I finished my first year of AmeriCorps, I figured the next step I could do, which one of the things that's fun for me is travel and seeing new places, and not just being a tourist, but actually living in those places. So for my second step, I took a position in New Orleans, Louisiana, which is a city that I've always had a romance with, and I've always been fascinated with the town. And then did my year of my second year of AmeriCorps there. And then while I was there, I wanted to continue working in the service industry, and I wanted to do it in a way that I could actually apply my anthropology degree. And so I applied for the Peace Corps, and the application for the Peace Corps process took a total of about 18 months. So it was a little overlap after my second year of AmeriCorps. But then, I've, like you said, like you mentioned, the core degree, and I've tried bringing this up to family, especially with choosing not to go back to grad school, but instead continuing my education through experiences. And so I have gained knowledge by traveling and being a volunteerist, as I like to say, and then living here in Madagascar. And when all is said and done, I will have been a volunteer for 4 years and have a 4-year experience that in certain instances is more valued than a 4-year master's degree or a diploma. And I've been lucky enough to have these opportunities come my way, and my core degree, 4 years under the belt.
Yeah.
Natalie, can I chime in on something?
Yeah.
So, I think what you just said was so interesting, because when I started graduate school, I was sitting in these classes and I was like, I know this stuff already. I did this practically, and so much of the first at least 4 to 6 months of social work school is dealing with all of the the idea of privilege, and understanding white guilt, and a lot of this stuff that you just inherently cover as an AmeriCorps volunteer. Maybe you're not reading all of the theory, but you're talking to your fellow Corps members constantly about, like, oh my gosh, what are we doing here? What is the impact? How can we make a difference? And how can we make a difference in such a short amount of time? And those issues are core to what social workers focus on in their first year of the master's program. And anyone who's done AmeriCorps has a leg up on that overall experience and goes in with a different lens than people who haven't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think in a way, I mean...
Yeah, I know.
Oh, go ahead, John.
Oh, I was just going to say, I know from my experience studying anthropology and reading theory about cultures across the world in the textbook, and then coming here and actually living in a small community, learning the local language and integrating with the people, I've learned, it's exponentially more than what I could have learned from a textbook in the classroom.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, as you said, Jerry, that AmeriCorps gives you such a unique perspective where you're able to pull in and draw on so many different resources and make so many connections that you really do have a leg up. And sort of you are able to, I mean, there are so many ways that you can sort of take that, which can also be a challenge because you're not quite sure what your next step should be. And actually with that, I'm going to segue into the next question, which is for you, Jerry. What challenges did you face when deciding your next step, and how did you, come to the decisions you came to?
So as I said, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and I wasn't sure where my path was going to take me, and I had to pull away from what I'd been told my whole life a career was. I think it took me a long time to realize that it was a big wide world out there, and there were so many different kinds of things that you can do professionally. Mm-hmm. And I talked to a lot of people. I networked a lot. I realized that I had thought that in order to make a difference, that I wanted to learn more. I wasn't necessarily ready to jump into applying for different jobs because I wasn't totally sure of what I wanted to do. So I wanted to learn more. And I saw graduate school as a great way to do that. I had no way to predict that my career was going to take the path that it did. My job didn't exist. My current job didn't exist when I was in AmeriCorps, and it certainly didn't exist when I was in graduate school, and it certainly didn't exist as something that someone with a social work degree was going to do. But I think the biggest thing is just about, for me, has been about being true to myself and knowing that following a path that is not necessarily laid out for you right away is okay, and that's actually a good thing, and it leads to more creativity for yourself and for the people around you, and you can bring all of your different experiences wherever you're going to create something that's truly unique. And I would encourage anybody who's finishing AmeriCorps now or starting it to really think about the skills that you're developing as a volunteer, and the things that you like most about your work, and know that there are lots of ways to direct those skills, and there are lots and lots of different things that you can do. And the more that you're aware of what you like and what you where your skills are, the more likely you are to land something that is right for you.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think it's almost like necessary at the end of your service to sort of list out, just walk through what you did and list out all the things you did and then pull from that what skill sets you might have learned. I think when I've done this with members, it's like they're almost astonished at how much that they were able to accomplish, and it sort of helps them see different ways that they really can kind of pull those things that they're passionate about and those things that they realize are strengths of theirs. So I'm glad that you touched on that. Thank you. Robert, I'm actually going to move to you now. In terms of translating your service to the workforce, how did you get where you are today?
You know, it's a pretty interesting story. You know, I didn't really think much about service after I was done with my year, and I was sort of swimming along professionally and doing things, you know, that I thought I was doing the right way. A lot of people ask me, you know, how does a guy with a bachelor's degree in English and history and a master's in education end up in IT? And you know, it was one of those happenstances. While I was doing my service, I actually was coordinating a lab at the school, and that just piqued my interest, and that's how, you know, my life in IT started.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, I talked about getting hit by a car while I was on my training ride, you know, last July, and you know, as I was on the road to recovery, which was really, really slow, you know, I had a lot of time to think, and you know, I was super fortunate. You know, over 93% of the people that suffer the injury that I had suffer permanent paralysis, and you know, I was able to walk away with, you know, with everything intact. And so I reached out to my older brother Andrew, and he at the time was actually going through a fairly large transition in terms of his professional career. One of the things that he found was that in the economy as it was, people were really focused on themselves, and you know, they weren't really focused on helping other people or taking the time to really listen to other people and have a good conversation. And so he and I talked about, you know, what it would mean to other people if we put together a company that was founded on the idea of service and giving to other people, and working to help mentor, train, answer questions of people who were either in transition or thinking about transitioning professionally, either from their job or, you know, questions that you might have about doing your job that you just don't feel comfortable asking other people at your job. You want to show your level of competence when you're at a job, but you also want to know that you're doing it the right way. And so, you know, Corner Office was really, you know, put together and started with the idea in mind that, you know, we are a group of individuals who are fortunate to be where we are, and that, you know, giving back to others who are in need of help is a really important thing. And, you know, that's really been an interesting part of who I am now, as I've sort of circled back to the idea of service and all the things that I learned, you know, when I was doing my volunteer service, you know, back in 1998. So it's been a sort of a circle, and it's come full, you know, it's come full circle for me as it relates to service.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think a theme I'm picking up on is that you can't really, you don't know what to expect. And in a way, there are a lot of times that after a little bit of time, you do see that there was a connection, but you can only see it in retrospect that you know, you've made this full circle. I'm definitely picking up on that in all the conversations, you know, the different answers that you've all given. Would you all agree with that, that that's sort of an element of life after AmeriCorps?
Yes.
Awesome. Related to this idea of how did you get where you are today, John, what's the most important thing you did to actually get where you are today? I know you sort of came up with some resolutions that were pretty interesting, and if you want to expand on that, maybe. Oh, John, your mic isn't on. Let's see if we can fix that. Uh-oh, we might be having some IT problems. Okay, well, while John is fixing that, we're going to move on. Does anyone else actually have anything they want to add to that question for any chance?
I can jump in, if that's cool. I think one of the things that I learned through my time in AmeriCorps, which helped me after AmeriCorps, and I'm going to make Ann Kendrick really happy by quoting Margaret Wheatley, is doing the work that gives you energy, not the work that you have to fight hard to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I think that I really did that. Like I said, I was really open, and as a result, I learned a lot. And so even the way I got into my master's program, like I decided I wasn't gonna pick one unless one picked me, until I found a program that I felt was right and was in line with where I saw my values and where I saw myself going.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I found. I did the Master's in Community and Social Change at University of Miami. And I did it while working at HCC, so it was cool because I got both to be in the classroom, and then I also got to be on the ground in the community. So it was just I felt very privileged to be a part of that program. But I think a big thing that I think what everyone's saying makes sense to me and totally applies to me. But I think also a big thing is find mentors that see the best in you and bring out the best in you and are willing to challenge you, but with love and with care. I feel like that's been a huge learning for me since doing NDA, is finding those people that will point out what are your assets and how can you best work to develop them, and it takes you sort of to that next step. So yeah.
That's great. We're going to toot our own horn at Notre Dame AmeriCorps, but I think part of the way that we set up the site directors and the site supervisors in our model is really to allow for that mentorship and that sort of that support through the site director. Not to say that every site director is going to be a mentor for each AmeriCorps member, but that they're there to provide that sort of support and guidance as they make their way through the year, but also beyond. Yeah. John, did you maybe get the sound to work by any chance? No, I don't think. He might be frozen. All right. Well, we are going to continue on. Terry, do you think you could talk about any pieces of advice you have for members who are wrapping up their year of service?
Yeah, so you touched on it, that idea of making a list of all of the different things that that you've learned and the skills that you have. I know we're going to talk a little bit about the hiring process a little bit later, but one of the things that I think has been crucial for me, and also that I've seen for anyone graduating from social work school or anyone who's finishing AmeriCorps, is this ability to talk about your own skills and to say, here's why I am a great employee, and here's what I've learned, and here's who I am. Mm-hmm. I think that is so important, and there's anyone who's done the AmeriCorps has a lot to say about that, and I think that is not something that we articulate all the time while we're in the middle of our service, because we're so focused on the work that we're doing. But taking a step back and reflecting on the different skills that you have is so important. Mm-hmm. I also think that the biggest things that are that I took away from that experience that I would encourage anyone who's finishing now to really think about is that you should never underestimate the power of positivity, hard work, and flexibility. And those are skills that almost every AmeriCorps anywhere has had to master in order to have a successful experience. So if you're passionate about the experience that you had or are having, then you likely have those three pieces. You know how to work hard, you know how to be positive, and you're flexible. So those things are always things that I'm looking for when I'm hiring someone, and they are always things that make for good employees. You also know how to work on a team. That's the other big one.
Great. John, are you back by any chance? I see.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Sorry.
No, that's all right. Yeah, do you want to actually, we're going to go back just to a question before that about your resolutions and the most important thing you did to get where you are today.
Okay. I think there's not one particular thing I can point out that helped me get to where I am today.
Mm-hmm.
But I think one of the most important personal decisions that I made is just to go with each choice that I make, professionally and personally, confidently. Just be confident that the choice that I'm making is something right. It's something that I want to do. It's something that I have the opportunity to do, and it's something that I should see through, no matter how mysterious the outcomes might be or how uncertain the situations I might find myself in. But I think it's just like I've had certain goals in my mind, personal goals that I've set for myself since I was, way younger, as I was growing up. And I don't know when Peace Corps entered into the picture, but Peace Corps aligned with a lot of my goals, which is how I found myself to where I am today. Because so many of the goals that I set for myself was to live in a foreign country, to learn a foreign language, to live and explore unique and diverse wildlife. And in Madagascar, I've been fortunate enough to be blessed with the opportunity to see wildlife that 80% of the wildlife on the island cannot be seen anywhere else. And
Wow.
So these are just kind of personal values and personal beliefs of my own that have kind of led the choices and helped me be confident in the choices that I'm making, because I have set these goals for myself early on.
That's great. And I think actually what both you and Jerry touched on, this idea that every experience, whether positive or negative, will have an effect on sort of your next steps, but it can also, I mean, they're learning experiences. They're things that you can gain from. Do you all feel like from your year of service, you were able to sort of, not necessarily compartmentalize, but that you were able to draw out those specific events? Or did it just seem more like a holistic, this is what happened in my service and this is going to be sort of where I'm moving next? I don't know if anyone wants to chime in on that. Did you understand the question? Did I even make sense?
I think it's both. It's both the holistic, and then it's also being able to identify those specific moments that are that create that change in yourself.
Mm-hmm. Great. Awesome. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I think it's also very individualistic in the sense that, in service work, it's not all about getting those thank yous. And a lot of times it's those small victories that make it worthwhile. And so a lot of times it's, just making, here specifically, it's just making a child laugh, having a successful joke in the local language, and just being able to take those small victories and see that as a win and not kind of clumping it all together. Because there are definitely those hard days where everything feels like it's going wrong, but then those small victories are what kind of keeps the passion alive inside to continue doing service.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to step in real quick, Natalie, and just say, I think one of the things that, to go back to the question Jerry was answering about, advice for people, there's often two pieces of advice that I give to people. One is not to be afraid to try something new. We grow up, I think, as a culture, afraid of failure. And for me, I tell people, especially those who are working for me, failure is just another experience. It's another way of learning, right? And it's totally okay to fail as long as you take something away from it. I know it sounds cliche, but I think professionally it's really something that people have to embrace in order to be successful. You have to be able to fail. You have to be willing to be able to and learn from it and walk away from it. And then secondly, I just want to say the service story is awesome for everybody who's listening. And what I have found is that my service story often humbles even the most powerful people, right? So don't be afraid to talk about it. It is, a really enlightening thing to hear from somebody else about something that they've done to give of themselves. And I think it's a way to start conversation. It's a way to start networking. It's a way to really get people to think about you outside of a little piece of paper that's your CV that you bring to the table. So, don't be afraid to talk about your service, and use it as much as possible because it is a very, very powerful story.
Mm-hmm. And what suggestions do any of you actually have for sort of how to express or explain your service when you're talking to a potential employer?
I think one big thing is talking about, like if you did any program management, learning the words to articulate what you did as far as that, like if you supervised anybody, if you were responsible for executing certain tasks as part of the organization, if you had any sort of part in grant writing or any sort of opportunity to do any of that. I feel like there's many ways to spin service and spin what you're responsible for. And it's not even spinning, it's just learning how to articulate it in language that other people understand depending on the industry you're in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's true. And I'm just actually thinking of this like sheet of paper that we have that we, as a site director, at least I'm the site director of Phoenix, I've used it with my members that sort of lists different professions and kind of skill sets that you need for them, and right. I had the members sort of mark which ones they had because it does give you sort of the language that you need, because sometimes you know what you did but you don't really know how to say, how do I explain that I managed 400 people at this orientation thing I did for St. Vincent de Paul? And it's like,
absolutely. Well, and one of the things too about nonprofit work is people say this is that the exciting thing in a way about nonprofits is that they are so categorically understaffed and overworked. So like you get a member in and it's like, oh my gosh, this new person who's excited to be here and who wants to learn. And so you get to learn so much more than if you were just in your first year of a company, because you're automatically given more responsibility as part of your service, and people just kind of trust you and just say go and and do it and figure it out. And so you get to develop so much more, I feel like, in 1 or 2 years than you would if you were not doing service, if you were in the business world, which is really great because if you can articulate the skill sets and what you developed, then that could translate over into another position, another career.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think to be able to have the confidence to sort of express, these are all the things that I did.
Absolutely.
I feel confident being able to sort of plug into your new company, your new organization in X, Y, and Z ways because of my time with AmeriCorps.
Mm-hmm.
I think if there's a way to also say, that you're a quick learner, or like the things that you're asked to do as an AmeriCorps can run the gamut, and some of those things apply directly to what you do in another institution or another organization, and some of them won't. But that ability to be open and to say, I'm up to try anything, and I'm up for learning as so long as it's okay to ask questions, which are all things that have been, at least for me, were highly encouraged when I was serving. So, knowing that you don't know everything going in, but that you're open to learn. Mm-hmm. And I think most AmeriCorps that I know had that sort of temperament, just to say, like, well, here I am, I'm going to try it, and I don't necessarily know what's coming, and I certainly don't know everything. And that is actually a rarer skill than it, you might think. I think that it's something that I don't see all the time from either colleagues or interns or applicants.
Yeah, I think the balance of humility and also confidence is something you learn in AmeriCorps, but you also have to remember as you're going into the interview or you're writing your job application.
One more thing, Natalie, that I want to bring up for folks. One of the best things that I've done professionally or started doing is to actually keep a journal. And it's a professional journal. It basically allows me the opportunity to write things down that I feel would be germane to my professional experience later on. So, taking a few minutes every, so often and just writing down, hey, here's something that I did that I feel like may be relevant to another experience or another job that I'm going to be seeking later on is really, really helpful because, you get stuck in the moment, you do a lot of things, and then you never really articulate what you did for that particular task. And I think it has to go back to being able to say, hey, I actually did this, and here are the things that were part of that actual task. It was about organizing people. It was about putting together documentation. It was actually mentoring people. So, I think the idea, you don't have to necessarily keep a journal, but, making sure that you always have in mind, that things that you're doing and what that, translates to skill-wise as a professional is fairly significant and important.
Great. Thank you for that. That's a great suggestion. Related to that, do any of you have any helpful tools or sort of processes for approaching the job search or job transition?
Actually, what Robert was saying just a minute ago just kind of jogged my memory a little bit, and something that's valuable that you learn, at least I learned in NDA and I learned through service, is that process of reflection after service. And that's not something that you necessarily would write down as a skill that you'd present to a company or an organization, but the ability to, like he was just articulating, to sort of serve and then reflect on your service and going into a new job, I feel like that's been very important and key, where you start out and you don't know what you're doing, or if you're looking for a job, you're not sure exactly, and you start, for example, I'll just use myself. So when I was transitioning from Hope Community Center to Baltimore, I was looking for jobs in, I was thinking, oh, well, maybe I could work for a big nonprofit that does legislation, in DC, and I could be an advocate, and actually, lobby for things I believe in. And for some reason, like, it was not working out, and it kept not working out, and it kept not working out, and I wasn't understanding why, and I kept applying to these places and getting interviews, but it didn't feel quite right. Like, I didn't feel right to them, and they didn't feel right to me. And I think that because I have those tools of, like, okay, so this is my experience right now, but I'm reflecting on it, and I'm constantly trying to learn. I was like, well, maybe I just need to switch. What do I like? What aspects of my job at HTC did I really like? One was working with the community, but one was working with students, right? And so I started looking for a job in higher ed, doing the work I've been doing, but translating it to the higher education world, and it suddenly clicked, and I ended up getting a position here at Loyola, and so it's just funny, sometimes things don't work for a reason, and it's a matter of taking a step back and not sort of drowning in that, but taking a step back and just being like, wow, this isn't working out, but what can work out in as far as what I love, what am I passionate about that can make this happen. So
that's great. I think that's a really good point to make. Thank you for that. On a little bit of a more practical note, something that I have actually found really useful in just listing out what I have done has been using LinkedIn. It's sort of, I didn't really know what LinkedIn was at first. I thought it was like the business Facebook, and I didn't understand it. But since using it, especially because we use it for the alumni professional group, where we post job positions and job resources and professional development resources, I realized that it's sort of like a working resume. I mean, it's a working document that lists everything you've done, and they also give you tools to sort of talk about your skill set. I mean, they have a million skills, and you can kind of pick which ones you have. And to have that in front of you also helps you recognize what what you've done and what language you should be using to talk about yourself. So although that's much more practical, that's something that I've certainly noticed in terms of approaching, different professional opportunities or talking to alums and members about different professional opportunities.
Can I add to that, Natalie?
Yeah, go for it.
So I think with LinkedIn is a great tool for also recognizing your relationships, and just as with with so much of service work, it's all based on, or a bunch of it is based on the relationships that you form. And I think that networking is never to be underestimated. More often than not, people get jobs that they're passionate about through connections. Like people who, and it's not through a long connection. It's just somebody hands a resume through a process that they say, pay more attention to this person because this person's great. I get resumes that way all the time. I am constantly sending people's resumes out to other people, and it really is it's talking to people, doing informational interviews, figuring out just how people got to where they are, and asking lots of questions and listening a whole lot makes a really good impression. And people remember to go back and say, oh, this one person came and talked to me about a year ago. I should see what they're doing now, and when there are jobs open. And I think you just have to think about who you know, and sometimes that's just like your existing network wherever you are, and figure out how to talk to people and learn more about what they're doing.
Great.
And LinkedIn helps with that a lot.
Absolutely. John, since you sort of went from service to service, do you have any suggestions, or can you kind of expand on maybe the process for that transition, sort of any insight or experience that maybe you found was helpful when kind of transitioning from your year in New Orleans to Madagascar?
Yeah, I think having a service background definitely made a big difference. It had a big impact with being offered the position with Peace Corps. I know when I was working with the recruiter as I was in the application process for Peace Corps, he told me when I initially applied that they didn't really have any openings until the summer of 2013, which for me would have been a very long break in between AmeriCorps, which I finished in July of 2012, and then it would have been almost a whole year for me. And because I had the 2 years of service through AmeriCorps, they were actually able to find me a position and bump me up by about 4 to 5 months.
Wow.
So making the transition, having the volunteer experience made a huge difference with the application process to find an organization like Peace Corps, a well-respected organization, a well-known organization. And yeah, I mean, even if you go through other channels to do international service, having a service background in the States makes a big difference. It shows that you're willing to commit yourself to, live on limited means and to put yourself in experiences that you might not have experienced before. And so the service background definitely looks great, whether you're continuing your service or not that I've gone through it yet, but it sounds like finding a professional job, having that service background really is kind of the cherry on top.
That's great. Yeah, I think that's actually another thing, a theme to pull out, this idea of commitment, that by signing on to do a year or 2 years of service, you are the kind of person that's going to commit to something. You're going to see it through. You are going to finish it to completion. And I think that's definitely something that can be translated and sort of a skill set to sort of hold on to and promote about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Robert, when you look back the years since you served, what was the biggest challenge you faced in sort of deciding or figuring out your next step, especially given that you sort of went in a different direction and then kind of came back full circle?
I think the biggest challenge for me was self-doubt. I had a lot of feeling like I didn't belong with the people that I was working with, especially given my background and the people in IT, and to not make my colleagues in IT sound bad. We're not a forgiving bunch. So I think it was really difficult for me to really have that self-belief. But I think I was able to get over that by leveraging my service skills and being able to think outside the box. Really helped me overcome my fears, because what I found was that I was working with really very intelligent people in IT, but a lot of them are very, very focused on black and white, and they don't have the skills to be able to think outside the box. And the other thing that I think really helped me in terms of the challenges that I faced in terms of just feeling like I didn't belong was the idea that while other people in IT are focused on themselves or whatever it is that they're doing, I was more focused on working as a team. And I think I learned that through my service, because when I was teaching, I worked with a lot of more experienced teachers, and we had the idea of, in IT they call it a stand-up meeting, which occurs every morning to talk about sort of where you're at. And I can remember, when I was doing my teaching, the teachers and I would get together at 7 o'clock every morning, discuss things, how the day before went, sort of what we should be looking out for. And it was much more of a community feel and sort of a collaborative experience. And I think that's really fairly important in IT, and it's become, with the rise of, certain methodologies, the idea of being able to work as a team member and working effectively as a team member has become such a huge part of the IT culture. And I know, if Fab were here, he definitely would say the same, because I know Google is definitely one of those companies, right, where collaboration is super important. So I think, the biggest challenge for me was the self-doubt. I think I was able to overcome those doubts based on, being able to use the skills that I had learned while I was doing my year of service.
Great. Thank you for that. Does anyone else have anything they want to chime in? Challenges faced?
I think the being afraid of not knowing what's right is always really scary. And I think that the way that the workforce has shifted, the fact that people do change jobs often, and that's an accepted part of being a professional at this stage where we are, it's okay to not know exactly what you want and exactly how you're going to get there. And if you can find different opportunities along the way that keep you motivated and energized, then it's okay to just learn what you can where you are and then take those lessons to the next place. And that's what the majority of the people I know who are happiest in their work are doing now. So I think it's easy to say where we all sit now looking back and being like, yeah, just take your path, it's going to get you there. But it really is. You don't have to know exactly what you want. My job didn't exist, and I never thought there would be a way to link engineering and social welfare. And I figured it out, and it does. Science festival.
That's great. What advice do you all have for someone who's interested in getting into your field? This is for everyone, so whoever wants to start first.
We're all going to jump at once?
It's a funny question.
Well, I assume that everybody... Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You go.
I would say that anybody who is currently in AmeriCorps already knows what it takes to be committed to service. And I think the big difference is being able to commit the longer term. You know, I did 2 years of AmeriCorps, but I had that break in between where I could decide, do I want to enter into the job market, or do I want to continue on doing service and move cities and make this big drastic change in my life? And then if you want to do international work, then that just expands tenfold. And so Peace Corps is a 2-year commitment, and it takes almost just as long for the application process. So one of the major things to do international commitment, both through the application process and through the actual work in your host country, is having patience and being able to, play the waiting game and just, wait until things fall in line and make sure all the pieces are in place before you dive into it and make that decision. So the most important thing I would say is to have patience in order to get to international service.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
I would say for higher education, I would think that if you're interested in higher ed, you can always certainly do a degree in higher ed or pursue some kind of academic career. But if you are, if you're coming from the nonprofit world and you have a certain amount of skills, look for centers or for an institution of higher learning that's looking for the skills that you're bringing to the table. So, for example, and I work for the Center for Community Service and Justice here at Loyola, and most of my office is comprised of folks not with a higher education background, although we all have masters, but at least with a background of community work, because our job here is to educate students from Loyola who are serving in the community and sort of building the bridge between the school and the institution and their education and the community and the service that they're doing, and the stories from the community. So they were looking for people who were on the ground and had that experience. So that's not such a direct answer, but take a hard look at what you're doing, what your skill sets are, and what you're passionate about, and see how that lines up with someone else that's looking for that, Yeah.
Great, thank you for that. All right.
I was just going to add that we talk a lot about, so I work in the cultural community now, and for museums or many cultural institutions or even many nonprofits, if you're interested in learning more about any of them or want to get your foot in the door, volunteering doesn't have to end when you finish your year of service. Every organization I know of is always looking for volunteers, and you can get involved in so many different ways and learn more about what organizations are doing. So I often look more closely at resumes from folks who have volunteered for our organization or for organizations like ours.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah, I think that is really useful. And I would say that like Maria was talking about, sort of taking a step back and thinking about the different ways, like the different routes you can take to actually get your foot in the door with an institution. They don't necessarily want, or they aren't looking for people that are doing what they're trying to, like the higher ed. It's not like they necessarily need someone who is a professor. They want someone who has that community experience, because that's what they're trying to do as a higher ed institution. And so I also know that, kind of thinking through and sort of just doing a Google search on different community organizations in your, city, or if you're interested in IT work, just kind of doing a search for what's out there, even if they don't have job postings, to just get in touch with them, like Jerry was saying, whether or not they necessarily need volunteers, to even just ask to have a conversation with them to find out more about them, to show that you're interested. That's the kind of networking that can really make a difference and sort of help you get an understanding of what they're looking for, but also sort of keep, they're going to know your name now. So,
Yeah.
just my little 2 cents.
Well, and to emphasize what you're just saying, like using the existing network that you've developed through NDA, and I was talking earlier about having mentors and developing relationships outside your service site, but outside of the organization, and maybe even possibly through the NDA network, can also be really strong. Because if someone knows someone in the organization that you're trying to work for or apply for, it helps. It does. Or if they find an opportunity and they think of you, and they pass it along to you, that's also a great way to get your foot in the door.
Absolutely, and I would say definitely using site directors as a resource for that is like crucial, but also our LinkedIn and Facebook page, the LinkedIn alumni group, we're looking for people to just post on it saying, hey, I'm looking for this, or are there resources on that, or does anyone have any sort of job experience with X, Y, and Z? I'd love to talk to you. It's not just a place where we're posting resources. We definitely want people to interact and exchange ideas. So for those of you watching or who watch the recorded version of this, definitely check it out. It's Notre Dame AmeriCorps Alumni LinkedIn group. And you can definitely just post to it. Great. All right. Robert, do you think you could maybe talk about sort of what you have planned next? What sort of you have as your next?
Yeah, so I've been working for a pretty cool client for the past 2.5 years. I've actually been working for Nike. It's been pretty awesome. I've been able to, in the past 2.5 years, help them launch global products, which cost hundreds of millions of dollars. But I think the important thing there was that the coolness factor was really high, and it helped me a lot in terms of getting back to being really healthy and fit. So not being on this client kind of is one of those you get to a point where you really enjoy the job. Right now, in terms of just transitioning to my next gig, right, I'm doing most of the standard stuff, trying to ping people and communicate with some people on LinkedIn. The job market here in Minneapolis, St. Paul is pretty good, so I don't have any fears about being able to find something. It's really right now about just making contact with your network, letting people know that you're available, and sort of looking at what types of opportunities will come along. I think I'm fortunate to be able to say, money isn't an issue. It's more about, finding a job that I love to do. And so, I don't have a problem with, looking at the contacts that I have and, looking at, who they're connected with and being able to, get an introduction from them. I think, a lot of people have this fear of using LinkedIn, and being able to have somebody say, hey, I know this person and they're really interested in your organization or your company, would you be willing to talk with them about, any future opportunities? And that, to me, is where I've had a lot of success in not only, finding a job for myself, but helping other people find jobs. It's really about who do you know and who do those people know. It's kind of cool when you log into LinkedIn and you say, hey, this is your network, X number of people, but did you know that based on knowing those people, you actually have a network of thousands of people, and it's really just an underutilized part of LinkedIn. It allows you to network so well and so broadly. I've talked to people in Portland and California and Florida and Alabama, just because of other people who that I have connections through. Have reached out to me about opportunities. So I can't stress enough, sort of the aspect of networking and how you can get that accomplished through LinkedIn.
Great, thank you for that. John, I'm going to actually ask you the same question. You're halfway through your 2-year commitment. Have you had any thoughts yet on sort of what you want to do next with the skills that you've gained and the experiences that you've had in Peace Corps?
Yeah, once I reached the 1-year mark, I started kind of putting my sights towards the future and thinking about that a little more. I mean, there's still a lot more that I want to do while I'm here in Madagascar. There's a lot more that I want to accomplish in my community, and a lot more that I want to see while I'm on the island. But I have been thinking about what I'm doing when I wind up back in the States. And one of the nice things that Peace Corps, one of the benefits of Peace Corps is they offer graduate school assistance. They have really good programs, and you get lower tuition and select programs throughout the country. And so that's one of the things that I've on my plate. They also offer priority application for government jobs. For certain government positions, I'm able to have priority application through for up to 12 months after my Peace Corps service. So that's another thing that I've had on my plate. And then the other path that I've been looking into is something similar to returning back to AmeriCorps. AmeriCorps was such a big part of my life. It was one of the best experiences in my life by far. People that I've met, the experiences that I gained, and maybe having more of a director's role in an organization like AmeriCorps. But it's one of those things where, I still have a long time left, and so either one of those doors, those 3 paths that I just mentioned, could open up doors. Some of them could shut. You never know what could happen between now and then. So, I don't want to wait too long, but I definitely, I'm still keeping several things on my plate before I try and commit to one thing or one path that I could go through after gaining my core degree after my 4 years of service.
That's great. Thank you for that. This next question is for Jerry and Robert. If you're, as in a hiring role, what do you sort of look for in people that you hire?
Robert, why don't you go first, because I've touched on this a little bit, and I'll add.
Sure. I'll actually share a couple of questions that I always ask in an interview, and it'll sort of give you an idea of where I come from. There are 2 questions that I ask, and it tells me a lot about people. One is, if you had a theme song, what would it be and why? And 2 is, if you were a superhero, what superpowers would you have, and how would that help others? And I always ask those 2 questions. The first question, in terms about a theme song, because it helps me analyze an individual's confidence in themselves. It gives me an understanding of where they're at in terms of their analytical skills, and just being able to take a deep look at themselves and be able to say, hey, this is what makes me who I am. And then, the superhero question really is just a fun question. It gets somebody to think outside the box. It tends to relax people quite a bit, and so for me, when I want to interview somebody, I think people have this idea that if you are in an interview, you're still like really in need of talking about your skills and how well prepared you are for the job. And for me, by selecting you to come interview with me in person and spend time with me, I already assume that you have the skills. I've already reviewed your resume and believe that those skills are there. And so for me, it's really an interpersonal conversation. How do they hold themselves? How do they interact with me? Do I feel like I'm going to get along with them? And then, how much are they willing to challenge themselves, to learn and to grow? And then, how much are they going to teach me, right? I think a lot of people go into an interview thinking, okay, what am I going to get from the job? What am I going to learn from the job? Not what can I bring to the table and what can I teach you. And to me, you know, the AmeriCorps story is pretty awesome, and it allows you to be able to talk really well about a lot of things that you bring to the table. And so I think, you know, doing that is really important.
Great. Thank you for that.
I think just to piggyback on that, because those are, I'm going to steal those questions. Those are good ones. I like that a lot, because I think you're right. You know, I don't, the skills that I'm often looking for in staff are not necessarily, they're not necessarily, you know, super specific. Sometimes they are, but for the most part, I really, once I see if I have a sense of how skills can translate based on someone's resume, and if their writing skills and communication skills are good, it's really about, for me, that interpersonal piece, making sure that there's a willingness to learn, and a willingness to teach some of the skills that you have, but also a willingness to listen, and to be aware of what your skills are and where your skills need to improve. And I am a huge, huge fan of feedback, and really crucial for me, for anyone on my team, to be able to take feedback and give feedback. Because we work with hundreds of different partners and different organizations, and in order to continue to improve and evolve, it's really important to get feedback from everyone and to listen to it and to figure out where you can change and adjust. And I think that's actually something that I was able to learn at first, or to start learning when I was living in Colorado, just this idea of, I don't know, there's a lot that I don't know. And you know, I think that piece, that sense of humility, is also really important, because the last thing, or very, very few offices are really welcoming of know-it-alls. People don't love it when others walk in, especially people who have never worked in a field or have never worked in that institution, walk in and are like, let me tell you all the things that I know. You're like, but yeah, what? So that sense of humility and that just ability to listen and sort of get a sense of where you are first before you start to overly dive in and interject is something I'm always looking for in interviews too.
Great. Thank you for that.
Natalie, one more thing.
Of course.
You know, when I do my interviews with people, and I probably have done 1,200 of these in the last 4 or 5 years. But one of the most important things that gets underutilized during an interview is the time the interviewer gives to the person being interviewed to ask your questions. I cannot tell you how much of a turnoff it is for me as a hiring individual to have somebody not ask a single question before they leave the interview. Nothing says I don't care about this job than not having any forethought into some question that you might have about the job. And it's really about selling, you know, how much you want the job. So, you know, regardless of whether or not, you know, you have any questions, it's always good to come up with 2 or 3. Go to the company's website, ask people about the company, come up with a couple of questions so that you appear to them as somebody who's interested in the position that you're actually seeking. So, you know, I just think it's a really crucial part that gets overlooked by a lot of people. And I don't want to pin everybody on this, but it's a lot of young people that I meet and interview do not take the opportunity to ask the questions.
I can't agree with that more. That is such an important point. And if you run out of questions, ask what the hiring manager's sense of the biggest challenge is going to be for the position. Is a good one to always just have in your back pocket, and also what the hiring manager's favorite thing about working for that organization is, because you'll end up getting a good sense of organizational culture And remember too that you're interviewing them also. Maria said it earlier that not everything is a good fit, and you may be offered jobs that aren't a good fit. And if you know that, it's important. Think about what you're looking for also. And that's something that I was not able to do at all when I first started in the field. I was not confident enough to know that I was interviewing organizations as much as they were interviewing me. And now I can really, I have a much better sense of what kinds of organizations I want to work for and the core values of those organizations. And without them, I can't work there. And just keep those in mind throughout the entire process.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you both. Those were really helpful. In terms of sort of transitioning after AmeriCorps from the stipend, for the two more recent alumni, Maria and John, what advice do you have, for sort of how to be financially responsible after living on a stipend?
So I was thinking about this a little bit, and it's funny, when I was in AmeriCorps, after being in college and making little money working minimum wage job, the stipend actually felt like an upgrade to me. But it was, but also, not, because suddenly I was out of the college bubble and I was responsible for rent and for gas and for all the expenses that go along with that. I think if you can save any kind of money while you're in AmeriCorps, just even a little bit, have a little bit of savings, that would be great. Or I actually know someone, a student who's a former student of mine here, who's going to be starting NDA in September, and he's working through the summer to save for his year, and that's going to be sort of his emergency, his emergency stash. And I was like, that's really smart. Emergency stash throughout service if something happens. But yeah, I think saving as much as you can. I think the cool thing about being a member is that you're suddenly in a community with potentially 10 to 15 people that are in your same situation. So you can do things that are more affordable together, and you already have an automatic group of friends that will just have a potluck with you, and it's rice and beans and some veggies, right? So I think taking advantage of those things and being mindful of your next steps. Using the Ed Award, I use the Ed Award for grad school, and I was lucky. I was hired by my site when I ended service, so I kind of transitioned into working right away. But definitely always having a savings and having that little bit to just in case fall back on, and be able to know that, okay, if I don't work for a couple months, I can still pay rent, is a really great thing to have in the back of your mind while you're doing service. It is possible to save money.
Thank you for that. John, do you have anything to add from going to the Peace Corps after your year or 2 years of serving with NDA?
Yeah, I think Maria hit it on the spot by saying that it is important to save as much as you can. I think that's one of the kind of unofficial lessons that you learn by joining AmeriCorps is money management, and it is also through the benefits, through the loan deference, and through the Ed Award. It turns out to be almost the same as a first-year salary coming out of college. So with all the benefits included and with everything kind of compiled into one, it is enough to live off of. And I know from my experience when I left finished AmeriCorps, I had been able to save up some money, and then I was also fortunate enough to be hired on part-time by the AmeriCorps, by the organization that I did my first year of AmeriCorps with in Cincinnati before I left for Peace Corps. And so, kind of having that resource and having the skill of money management and being able to live off of, a meager salary, it was definitely a lesson, and it's something that when I start making an average salary, I think it's the skill that I will apply. throughout my professional.
Great. Thank you for that. This is the last question, guys, and this is for all of you. So why don't we just have Jerry? Why don't you just start with this? What have you used your education award on, and how did you decide what you were going to use it on?
Mine is easy. I directed both years of my education award towards my first year of social work school. I also had I had financial aid in the form of scholarships and also just regular loans. So I still have social work school loans that I'm paying off, but the Ed Award did make a dent specifically on my first year.
Great. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
For those of you who maybe haven't used your award, have you thought about what you might use it on?
I used it on student loans, just like Jerry. You know, I was going to grad school to get my master's in education, and I actually used that award to help me pay for that.
Great.
I also use my awards, like I just said, in my master's program. I think something to remember if you are considering grad school, it's kind of like Jerry was saying about how you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. Like, you have to make sure that the program is the right fit, and I was really honest with the program, and I was just like, look, I can't do this for this amount of money, and I ended up being able to get funding in addition to my Ed Award, and I still have loans that I'm paying off too, but that's what I use it for.
Great, thank you for that.
I've used part of my education award to pay off my undergraduate loans, but Peace Corps also has a deferment program, and so my bills have not yet started filling. So I'm fortunate enough with that. But during my hiatus between AmeriCorps and Peace Corps, I used my loans to pay off. I used my education award to pay off some of my undergraduate loans.
Great. Thank you for that. And that concludes actually the questions we had, the facilitation of the webinar. I really appreciate you all taking the time, and I'm going to actually turn on the Q&A to see if anyone has any questions. I have to say I haven't done this before, so bear with me as I stare at my screen for a moment, see if it works, see if any questions come up. Okay, so far, not seeing any. Take a moment to let our viewers formulate questions potentially, but in the meantime, what I'm going to do is actually share your information, your emails, with the group so that they can, if they do have questions to follow up, or if they do want to talk to you more specifically about what you did, they can do that. Along with this, I've added how you can search our LinkedIn, our Facebook, and also our Google Plus page. This webinar is through the Google Plus page. It will be recorded through YouTube, and I'll make sure to put that link out on our LinkedIn, on our Facebook, and also on Google Plus. Let's take a moment. All right, I'm not seeing any questions, so thank you all for joining. I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure talking to all of you, and I hope you all have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Natalie, for putting this together.
Absolutely, yeah, thank you, and thanks for sharing your story.
And definitely anyone out there, please feel free to get in touch. You know, I'm always happy to help, and just know that you're not alone, that we all have gone through that feeling of not knowing what comes next, and I think that as a community we're all happy to help.
Absolutely.
And I just want to say, each one of you has done something pretty amazing. Whether you're finishing up or whether you're starting, to give a year of service or more is a tremendous personal sacrifice, and you will definitely reap the benefits. One of the biggest regrets that I have is that I didn't continue to do that throughout my life. And as somebody who's been able to return to that part of being focused on service, it's just an amazing thing. So you should be very proud. I'm humbled by the other panelists here, and I want to thank Natalie especially. I know she's just been tireless in her effort trying to get this thing going, and it's a great community. Please, please, please make use of it.
Oh, we lost Robert. Nope, there he is. Great. Thank you, Robert. Thanks for that. And yeah, I'm going to put this screen up again just so you get the emails one last time. There they are. Great. Well, I hope you all have a good rest of your day, and happy Friday.
You too. Thanks so much, Natalie.
Thank you.
Yeah, Natalie.